Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. All right, and then we want to welcome our presenter today. We have here Lindsay Van Dyke. She is a infant and mental health supervisor with the Pennsylvania Key. It's my pleasure to welcome Lindsay here today, and just bear with us for one moment while we transfer the presentation over to her.
On. Welcome, everyone, and good morning, and thank you for having me. As mentioned, my name is Lindsay Van Dyke. I'm a supervisor for the Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation Program at the Pennsylvania Key. I supervise the northeast, north central part of the state, the more remote areas, although I recently have moved down towards the central part of the state in Hershey. So, kind of covering larger regions of Pennsylvania and have a little bit of knowledge of all the different areas. So today, my presentation is going to be on foundations of infant mental health and a discussion of child development. So really talking about what that is and what that means. So to understand that, first we really want to talk about what is infant mental health and how are we going to reference it today and why does it matter? So as you can see, the definition of infant mental health is on the screen. And for some people, the idea of mental health brings up the idea of mental illness. And that can often produce a sense of stigma around some of this topic for us. But really, what we encourage you to identify is that good mental health is something different. What we're actually talking about is supporting mental wellness. So, regardless of mental illness, we can all improve and work towards improving our mental wellness. And mental health and wellness are part of a children's overall well being. ICMH is the same thing as a healthy social emotional development, and early experiences shape lifelong development. So it means supporting children so that they can form close and secure interpersonal relationships. Well, we'll talk about how that impacts development moving forward today, as well as experience, regulate, and express a full range of emotions. I think this is important. Oftentimes, we think about the emotions that we like to see, the happy, glad, excited, surprised, and don't often want to see kids expressing the anger or the frustration that might look challenging for some. And then we're also going to explore and how we support children to explore their environment and learn, all within the context of family, community, and cultural expectations for young children. This is something I'm probably not going to have a ton of time to talk about today, but there are some really great resources that I would like to give you afterward for you to be able to continue the thoughts through this as well. So, our roadmap of today and what we're going to be talking about is really defining and navigating what developmental milestones are. Why does early identification matter? And when are the times that we want to intervene? How stress and trauma affect early childhood? And then some practical strategies to support healthy development. So, how do we check child development? I would love to see who has used in the chat. Can you identify who has used developmental milestones before? And if so, where do you access the developmental milestones that you use? I'll keep an eye on the chat. The CDC milestones, great. Oh, beautiful. So some of the things I'm seeing in the chat already are ASQs, CDC milestones, ages and stages, beautiful, that are used throughout. Very nice. VORT, PAT milestones. Great. So for this presentation, I'm going to focus on ASQs because we also use those for our program as well. I do also recognize the CDC milestones in here too. Some of this information that I've gotten today for this has come from the Cleveland Clinic, but they are very much many places that you can find the developmental milestones. But developmental milestones are behaviors that experts use as a landmark to track development. I think that's really important to keep in mind that it is a landmark, and children all develop at their own pace. So experts set the landmarks based on what 3 out of 4 children can do at a specific age. So when you're thinking about that, the likelihood is not everyone's going to meet those milestones, right? And they are just, in fact, that a milestone. And so we're going to kind of break those down a little bit more. But experts divide those child growth and development areas into four areas. We've got motor, which is the area is all about control of body movements. Some examples might be using your hands and fingers, walking around, moving, all of those things. Cognitive, and these are skills revolving around your baby's ability to think and solve problems. Language and communication is your baby uses these skills to interact with you and others. They don't just involve sounds and words, they can also include gestures and eye movements. And then social emotional. And these abilities revolve around your baby's feelings and emotions and being able to express them and how they react to the emotions and behaviors from you and others as well. So these are the ones we are going to talk about and cover a little bit today. So here I've got a couple pages of some of the CDC developmental milestones for us to consider. And again, these provide typical milestones. We often use these to share with providers and then how you can help your child learn and grow. So oftentimes we might be seeking these out on for ourselves, for our children, and to support the families to give them a general idea of where development is on. So the CDC's developmental milestone checklists are communication tools intended to encourage ongoing conversations between families and professionals. So these checklists also help identify the need for additional screening. So a lot of you had mentioned the ASQs, which are screenings that we would be completing on children's development to see where they fall, which we'll talk about in a minute too. But the developmental milestones, which is what I think is important, included on their website are not developmental guidelines or standards for children's development. They should not be used as screenings or diagnostic tools to determine developmental delays. So again, these are things that we're using to identify about where a child's development are, not to determine if they have a delay, if they need additional supports. It really is just to help give us an idea or an identification of where that child might fall. So let's look at it a little bit closer. Here's one that I printed out that is on children at 2 years old. So you can see, again, they're broken into these milestones that we had talked about: social and emotional, language and communication, cognitive milestones, and movement and physical development milestones. So when we look at these, you're going to see a variety of things that, again, 3 out of 4 children are able to accomplish at this age. You'll also see on these milestones, it does talk about using developmental screenings. So at 2, your child is due for screenings and to talk to your pediatrician about these things. So I would love to know in the chat, have you heard, because there have been some changes to these milestones in the past 3 to 5 years at this point from the CDC. Have you heard of these changes? I'd just love a yes or no in the chat. No. Okay, we've got a mixed bag. Because I know that there were some feelings that have come up about the changes to the milestones. So if you have said yes, I would love to hear or see your thoughts around your feelings about how that has gone and how that might impact your work and what you're seeing. And I'll talk about a little bit what the challenges or the changes have been. The CDC's updates were designated to reduce ambiguity and provide clear guidance for parents and professionals. So some of the things that they did was when I had mentioned earlier that we have those benchmark standards of 3 out of 4 children. So that changed recently within, again, the past 5 years. Milestone benchmarks are currently at that 3 out of 4 children or 75%, which used to be at 50%. So it used to be 2 out of 4 children, and now they've bumped it to 3 out of 4 are expected to meet that milestone by a given age. So it has changed the benchmark standard of how many children at that age. They also adjusted ages. So they've changed things from maybe a younger age to a higher age because they have changed the indication of 75% to 50. They lowered some of the language standards. So the milestone for a 50-word vocabulary shifted from 2 years to 30 months. So that has gone up again. And then they added some additional milestones for 15-month-old and 30-month-old toddlers, emphasizing social emotional skills such as smiling to gain attention at 4 months. They've also removed some of the milestones from the list as well. So I will say, if you're keeping an eye on it, it might be something interesting for you to check out and look through the CDC's developmental milestones because they do and have changed in the recent time. Now, I know we've talked about giving screenings and that we have used some of those screenings for our programs. Where else do you see families accessing screenings? Do you recommend these milestones? Where do you see them getting this information? Pediatrician's office? Yeah, school. Social media too. That's really interesting. And I think it's great that they're getting it there, WIC and Nurse Family Partnership. So this is awesome. And something that we're going to want to talk about towards the end too is making sure that we're using these supports and services that are available to support these families. Because child development can oftentimes be scary when you think something maybe isn't normal or isn't typical and you're concerned or worried about where to go. Making sure we're connecting them with the supports is really important. Yeah, pre-K and Head Start. Yeah, this is great. There's so many supports that are offering these things. Pediatrician's office is a great place for them to be screening. Um, if you have not looked already on the CDC's website, and in there, they have an app that parents can have that they can track the milestones that way, as well as they have some resources on how to talk to pediatricians and how to talk to your provider about feeling like maybe things aren't where they need to be. I highly recommend that and helping families with understanding how to have those conversations because I think sometimes when they're in that moment, we don't always know what to do or say. And anytime we can support them in having those conversations, we're going to be more successful. So these again might be something that a family is accessing on their own or looking for, like people had mentioned. Maybe they're coming through school, maybe they're coming through the pediatrician, maybe it's coming from social media. Then the other thing we have is developmental screenings. Again, we're going to be referencing the ASQ here because that is also what we use for our program and infant and early childhood mental health. So what are screenings? I think this is an important topic that we talk about too. These are brief and accurate tools that are very much valid, that identifies children developing on schedule. It identifies children who might benefit from some additional practice and support in specific areas. And it can identify children who are at risk for further developmental delays, who might need to be referred for further evaluation. So again, question that a screening answers is, does this child need a deeper assessment? It does not tell you if this child has a delay, but in fact, do they need additional assessments to figure things out? What is nice about those CDC tools that I had mentioned, if you see for each age, they also have a second page that is how to help your child learn and grow. So in relation to these milestones, you also have ideas of what to do and how to support your child. So different things to try. You can see a couple of them here. Give your child balls to roll, kick, and throw. So helping parents identify what they can do with their children to help them with getting to these milestones. Okay. Screening results for a screening, again, will tell you that most children are actually on schedule and doing great. Some children will benefit from practice in specific areas. This one says like fine motor. Oftentimes we see that with young boys, that fine motor skills tend to be on the low side, or other additional family supports. And then a few children might need referrals for evaluation. So again, for additional supports that are not being identified just in the screening. The at-risk is being identified in the screening. They'll need an additional evaluation, a more in-depth assessment to determine if there is a delay occurring. So main rules of thumb here are keep in mind that screening doesn't diagnose for delays or disabilities. It will tell you if they're at risk and need additional supports, but it does not diagnose. Screening does not identify specific child goal areas to target. It will give you ideas of where you can support and help improve, but it's not going to give you specific things. And a screening does give us information on general areas of a child development. So again, this is giving you a broader view and an overlook about where their general development is. Any questions on that? It seems like all of us are using those screeners. I think the thing that we talk about a lot and frequently come up against is the families that maybe struggle with getting the results, that maybe their children's falling at risk or monitoring. Are you seeing that happen? And how do we support families with that information? I'd love to hear from you. And if you want to sit and think on that a little bit too, I'd love to have you consider that as we move through this, because the one thing that we learn is early intervention is best, right? The sooner we can intervene, the likelihood when that brain is really firing, which we'll talk about in a little, the better results that we can get. Although, what I want to encourage and remind you all too is that the brain is plastic, and the brain always has the ability to change and alter and form different synapses and neural pathways to get to things. And so, even if we cannot, or the parents are struggling, yeah, here someone wrote, there are parents reluctant to label, in their words, too young, trying to remind them that early is better. We do have those. And also, sometimes we might need to just sit with it for a little before we can get the parents there. And that is okay too. So earlier is better, yes, and also supporting the families to get to that line, even if it happens a little bit later, is also okay. But I love some of the responses in the chat. I highly encourage you to check them out too. And yeah, the activities are always going to help, right? The more times we can get families to work with these children, and we'll kind of talk through that a little bit, the better we're going to end up in the end for whole development in reality. So we often think about what is typical, right? What is typical development mean? What I'm here to say today is that typical is very much a wide range of normal, right? Everyone is on their own unique schedule. Development is not linear. It does not always trend in the same direction all the time. And biology, interactions or relationships, and environments all influence development. So we're going to watch this short video. If you haven't seen them already, 0 to 3 does a brain builders presentation and training, and they have a great lady that does some quick brain facts that you can always share.
Did you know that developmental milestones are helpful for learning patterns in children's growth and development, but they are not strict deadlines? Each child develops at their own pace, and their development is shaped by a unique mix of biology, environment, and the quality of the relationships they form with their caregivers. More important than the exact timing is the order in which skills emerge and the richness of the interactions that support them. And behind these visible milestones like walking and talking are extraordinary processes happening in the child's brain. Neural connections are constantly being refined, and some are strengthened and some are pruned away, allowing the brain to build more efficient and powerful networks across its different parts.
We're going to do a little pop quiz because, just as she has mentioned, children's development really is based on the brain development, right? And so we need to know a little bit about brain development in order to understand child development. So in lieu of time, oh, here we go. The poll is up. So pop quiz 1. A baby's brain is a quarter of the size of an adult brain, but it does doubles in size within their first year. I've got a lot of truths. And I love that someone went against, oh, we've got a couple going against the grain with the false. Okay. Great. I'll give it just another minute or two. Go ahead and get your answer in. Okay. I'm going to end this one. And the results will be, you can see 88% said true, and the answer is in fact true. Some other quick facts about the brain. So a baby's brain does in fact is a quarter the size of an adult's brain, but it does double in size in the first year of life. A child's brain produces more than 1 million neural connections every second. 60% of a baby's energy goes into developing its brain. After birth, the brain grows 1% per day for the first 3 months of life, which is crazy to think about how much these brains really are developing. A 2-year-old's brain is much smaller than an adult's brain, but has 50% more synapses. And, that's when all of these kind of connections are going through and we're learning all the things. A 3-year-old's brain is about twice as active as an adult brain. And this one's my favorite. A piece of brain tissue the size of 1 grain of sand contains 1 billion synapses. The thought of all the things going through the baby's brain and all the things that they're taking in and creating these pathways, to me, just shows. And so many of you have said it earlier, the earlier we can intervene when we're making all of those pathways and really working on the process of forming the ones that are going to be strong over time. So you can see in this, intervention in the early years is supported by brain plasticity. So brains are built over time from the bottom up. So we start really at that survival skills and really learning to strengthen those, and then continue to go upway in the ongoing process that begins before birth. Simple neural connections form first, then followed by more complex circuits. So the connections that form early provide either a strong or weak foundation for the connections that form later. I just saw a question in the chat. I will get to that in a little and try to. And if not, please remind me by the end and I'll try to bring that back. And then our early experiences shape our brain architecture, which provides the foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. So when we think about social emotional development and infant mental health, it really is that foundational piece that supports the ability to learn. So feeling safe, feeling secure, feeling like I have someone here to support me when I can't take care of myself. Those are the things that we need to be able to do. If you think oftentimes about these children that we have a lot of the times, the struggles are we can't regulate our body, right? We don't feel safe, and then we're not able to learn. We're not able to build on those building blocks of brain development. So infant mental health is truly the foundational piece to support all of those things and building off of. So the question was, are you linking typical development in all domains to healthy mental health development? Would I say that social emotional connections matter the most for mental health? I would say that those are the foundational pieces to making children feel safe and in order to learn and add those additional things on top of. And we're going to be going through that a little bit and talking about what might impact those things as well as what can support those things and moving forward too. So early support improves longer-term outcomes, which is important. But again, like I had mentioned, because the brain is plastic, that doesn't mean it can't learn throughout time too. It is just you're going to have a stronger foundation if we do it younger. And caregivers are the key observers. They're the ones that are taking this in and seeing what's going on. And when we think about it, babies learn in relationship with. Right? They're not picking these things up on their own. They're looking for facial expressions. They're looking for connections that serve in return that we'll talk about in a little bit in order to grow and form these connections. So here comes the second one. True or false? Responsive relationships are not essential for building healthy brain architecture. I don't know if the poll is going to pop up. And if not, you can put true or false in the chat. Great, I'm seeing a lot of falses. Beautiful. Beautiful. That is, in fact, false. Very much so. Responsive relationships are essential to infant mental health and learning. So we're going to watch this quick video on what serve in return is and then talk about it a bit.
Children's brains are built from their earliest months. back and forth interactions with parents, caregivers, and other important people in their lives help them learn and grow. When a child talks or gurgles to an adult, it's like they're serving in a game of tennis. When that adult talks or gurgles in response, they're returning that serve. By watching closely, we can pick up on what and when a child serves and make a rally of these interactions. And this repetition back and forth actively builds a child's brain. Because every time a child uses their social, emotional, and language skills, they activate and strengthen parts of the brain that underlie these skills. These form a sturdy foundation for future learning and growth, and healthy relationships with others.
Healthy development depends on the relationship a child has with important people in their life. These and other trusting relationships are essential for a child to feel safe and begin to manage and regulate their emotions. Serve and return interactions also help build other key skills like turn-taking, associating words and objects, and sharing attention. These skills built from the age of 0 to 5 lay the foundations for more advanced skills in adolescence and adulthood, like maintaining friendships, resolving conflict, and being motivated to learn.
Okay, I'm going to pause it there. And serve and return is, in fact, an active process. So serve and return interactions are responsive back and forth exchanges between the young child and a caring adult. These interactions are very much like a game of tennis, right? It's back and forth where everyone has to participate and be engaged and aware. They form a critical part of child's social environment. And you had mentioned, and you heard him say, that these are essential to not only feel safe, but also to regulate and co-regulate. Why do you think that is? What do you think? Oh, yeah. If you watch the rest of this video, it does talk a little bit about screens and devices too. But why do you think that is? What is helping a baby, let's go all the way down to a baby, help regulate at this point by doing this serve and return? What are they looking for or looking at? Yeah, safety, comfort, right? Attention. They're looking for response. And the way my face or my sound and tone show up very much help that baby to either regulate or not be regulated, right? If I'm coming in with a different level of expression and emotion, maybe I'm inattentive, maybe we're getting it. They're looking for assurance, so many of those things. And so we think about these things a lot. It is important in creating not only that infant mental health and that foundation, but that foundation and attachment so that we can continue to learn and develop and grow. So not only that, but they also support development of early language and social skills. There's a lot of research that shows the more words that we're exposing young children to, the better their language is as they're growing as well. So making sure that we're narrating things, that we're giving those words and talking to our babies, reading books, doing all those things that can very much promote that higher brain, like child development and brain development at a young age. So the serve and return interactions really reinforce brain circuits that are at the core for our early emotional well-being and social skills, but also the other things as well, that language connection, even before they can talk and understand words. This serve and return and these interactions are essential for healthy development. And these are things that we talk about and we identify with families all the time. That is the key and the core with supporting their development and moving forward. Okay, so we touched on this a little bit, but when we think about it, how does stress, trauma, and life challenges affect babies? So what do those babies absorb through their environment? If you look back at the chat just a bit ago, we're hearing a lot of things that potentially are being mentioned of what the baby's identifying or seeing through that serve and return. So when we think about stress and trauma, both for the child, oftentimes we're thinking about how that's impacting the adult too, correct? Because we learn through that relationship. And so what ways do babies absorb through their environment? Somebody said it earlier, voice tone, right? Where like tones of voices can very much alert us to stress in an environment. What other things do you think babies are picking up in their environment to alert them to stress? Body language, that's a huge one. And anxiety? Yeah. What else do you think? What do you think they're picking up? Eye contact, right? Avoidance, maybe, potentially. Neglect, yeah. Facial expressions is a huge one. If you haven't already looked at the research talking about and looking at the still face experiment, you can see a lot of these things and how they impact a child's development and attachment. Beautiful, Rhonda, attention or lack thereof. All of these things are very much impacting and having what babies are picking up and absorbing through their environment. So again, availability, emotional tone, and some of those stress cues that we're talking about. So we're going to do another pop quiz because I think this is also helpful. Oh, Caroline, the nutritional deficiencies, that's so important to note too. And I do want to make sure I touch on some of that before I end today as well. But first, we're going to do another pop quiz because I think this is really important to think about and consider. So, true or false? All stress derails children's child development. See what you think in the chat. True or false? Okay, I see a lot of false. I did see one or true or maybe two trues in there, but there is a lot of falses. Danielle, some stress is good, question mark. Love that. So this is what we're going to talk about a little bit. So the answer is in fact false. Some performance anxiety is expected. Yeah, so we're going to talk about stress levels a little bit because this is also important to know and see that the reality is not all stress is bad. There are 3 different types of stress that this video is going to show us: toxic, tolerable, and positive. And children who experience toxic stress, which is oftentimes what we're thinking about when we're thinking through what trauma might be, are at a greater risk for health problems like heart disease, diabetes, and depression. We talk a lot about the ACEs. This also falls right in line with some of those things. But there are other kinds of stress as well. So we're going to watch this quick video and then talk about that.
Learning to deal with stress is an important part of healthy development. When experiencing stress, the stress response system is activated. The body and brain go on alert. There's an adrenaline rush, increased heart rate, and an increase in stress hormone levels. When the stress is relieved after a short time, or a young child receives support from caring adults, the stress response winds down and the body quickly returns to normal. In severe situations, such as ongoing abuse and neglect, where there is no caring adult to act as a buffer against the stress response stays activated. Even when there is no apparent physical harm, the extended absence of response from adults can activate the stress response system. Constant activation of the stress response overloads developing systems, with serious, lifelong consequences for the child. This is known as toxic stress. Over time, this results in a stress response system set permanently on high alert. In the areas of the brain dedicated to learning and reasoning, the neural connections that comprise brain architecture are weaker and fewer in number. Science shows that the prolonged activation of stress hormones in early childhood can actually reduce neural connections in these important areas of the brain at just the time when they should be growing new ones. Toxic stress can be avoided if we ensure that the environments in which children grow and develop are nurturing, stable, and engaging.
Great. So, as you see in that video, again, we do have different types of stress. And again, some stress is good because it helps us activate our body's response system that can happen. And the thing to remember about this stress is supportive relationships with caring adults can buffer that stress response and promote resilience and healthy development. So when we think about tolerable stress, oftentimes tolerable stress could fall into toxic stress if we didn't have those relationships or those caring adults in our lives to buffer it. That really does impact the difference of it. That toxic stress is very much when you don't have that relationship there and you feel alone in that and you don't have someone to support you through it. Oh, I love this. It is stressful for babies to learn all of those things, and healthy children push through the stress and grow. Love it. Thank you, Angela. Great comment, right? And the likelihood is in that situation, those babies might be stressed, and having that caregiver or caretaker around that's encouraging them and trying, this is what we all do, right? When our kids are learning to walk and we're like, come here, come here, come here. We're getting them through it because it can be stressful. And also when they have us to be there and celebrate and cheer for them, we're also including that relationship and those healthy interactions. When we think about development, again, that's a wonderful example about how relationships and those interactions can support or potentially harm a child's development. So again, that's a beautiful example of that. I really appreciate that. And like they had mentioned in that video, trauma is an event perceived as a threat or danger. So trauma to me could be very different than trauma to you, right? It is how we are perceiving it or how these children are perceiving it. And over time, it really can change our brain development if we don't have those relationships to buffer it. So you can see the brains over here. We've got the typical developing brain. And when you think about it, and we think about that learning and a lot of the things that we need to do to learn that higher level thinking, all of that comes from that cerebral cortex or the front of the brain, right up here in your front. And when we think about how that brain is developed, we've got our survival down here. So back in this back section, and then we're moving up and adding to it. So this frontal lobe is where we have it. And when we have to live in a stressed brain, we oftentimes say we blow our lid, right? And so that frontal cortex is gone. And you can see through these video or this imaging that that very much is the case. When we have a child that is neglected or has significant trauma and that intolerable and that toxic stress, we're oftentimes seeing the back of the brain or that survival area lighting up red a whole lot more, right? Because those are those neural connections and those neural pathways that we're strengthening versus that top up thinking where we can build on that and learn. And so again, this is scary to look at, right? It's hard to see that these brains can look different. And again, I encourage you to remember that brains are plastic. We always have the ability to intervene. We always have the ability to remake neural pathways. It may take some time, but we can do it. And so just remember that there is always hope. I say it all the time, and hopes is the opposite of ACEs, right? Hopes is the healthy outcomes for positive experiences. And knowing that adding those things to it, and if you haven't looked that up before, I highly encourage you to. There's some really great research on what those positive experiences can do and help to buffer, provide resilience, and support children. So when we think about what do we do? How do we potentially buffer that? Or how do we build child development and strengthen child development, even if there's not trauma going on? There's always strong, healthy, loving relationships are the connection. The power of connection, babies learn through those relationships, right? So just as negative experiences and exposure are more likely to have harmful impacts in childhood, anything we do to protect a child during that time is likely to have a significant positive effect on their development too. So thinking about that, there is so much hope in giving those positive relationships, creating that serve and return with those babies, and even older children that need that reassurance too. And also utilizing co-regulation as the foundation for self-regulation. I say this all the time. There's plenty of adults that don't know how to regulate their body when they're stressed and emotional and upset. Little children don't have that either. And so oftentimes when we say, send them over there to calm their own body, you need to go there and calm, more often than not, those kids have no idea what that means. And so we often need to think about how do we co-regulate? How do we provide what that looks like? How can we be there in the moment? Maybe not even saying anything, but just sitting next to as it's happening. Maybe offering a hug. Maybe doing any of the things to help the child see how we regulate and model that for them so that they then in turn can learn that too and pick that up. Using play, I think this is something that's so underutilized and so misunderstood. Oftentimes, play really is the intervention. This is the language of children's learning. If we can, through games, be playful, children can practice and strengthen important skills, especially executive functioning. So things helping them to focus their attention, strengthen their working memory, and developing some of that basic control. The more we can do to play with children, the more they learn. So those skills will really help them throughout life. There is some really great research on play too. In an interest of time, I won't be able to go through all of it, but just know that play is that intervention. If we can get down on the child with their level, we really can model, we can practice those skills. We can do all those things to help support them in their development, which if you go back to those CDC papers on that second page, most of those things that you're going to see them recommend are in fact play. And so always encouraging play as the answer. The final thing too is taking care of ourselves. Not only the families taking care of their children, but also ourselves taking care of the families and caring for the caretakers. This is said all the time, but it's real. You can't pour from an empty pitcher, right? If our job is to pour the love into them and we don't have it, we can't do it. And so we think back to that baby and how they're taking in stress through the world. I heard it in a training from Devereaux and Building Your Bounce once, and it's stuck with me ever since. We all hear the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. But when we think about that, what if the village is sick? What are we doing and how are we raising that child? Life is so stressful right now. The world is stressful and all the things that are going on. That weighs on us. And if those children are looking to us to form that relationship to support their learning and their development, we have to take care of ourselves, to show them to take care of themselves, and also to provide that healthy base for that attachment. So coming up with a plan, something you can do in the moment, whether it's 3 deep breaths. We often think about self-care as go to the spa and have, get your hair done. But there's also things you can do in the moment. Short meditations, breathing, even sometimes just pop in a mint in your mouth or something to help ground you in that moment. We need to make sure we have a plan so that when those situations come up, we are able to do the things that we know. I think the other thing here that I really just taking care of ourselves also means normalizing differences, right? That what you're going through is stressful, and what you're going through and supporting children that maybe you're scared their development isn't on track, you need to remind yourself that you're not alone and that there are so many other people out there. Again, these milestones, 3 out of 4 kids are hitting. But if you're making that 75% a much larger number, there is a significant amount of people that aren't meeting that. And when we think typical, that is scary to think that atypical might be my child or maybe the kid that I'm supporting. And so normalizing that it's okay and that there are so many out there that are struggling too can make us feel like we're not the only boat in the storm. Right? We're all in boats out there together. Our boats might look a little differently, but we're all in the water. And so I think making sure we're taking care of ourselves. Angela, I couldn't agree more. Self-care is mandatory to keep from burning out. And all of us as caretakers or supporters of people in social services in any way, shape, or form have the highest risk for compassion fatigue, getting sucked into these things that we just want to help people. And so making sure that we're taking care of ourselves truly is the parallel process to help families see that it's important to take care of themselves so that children pick that up too. And so I can't say it enough how important it is that even at our level, we are taking care of ourselves. And then getting support. So we've got a few slides of resources after this, but I really want to sit with this video for a minute. So we're going to watch this quick. For some reason, here we go. Okay.
We all want to give our children what they need to grow to their full potential. And as parents, we play an important role in their development. But our parenting is affected by the supports and challenges in our lives, including experiences that cause what's known as toxic stress. Stress is called toxic when it doesn't let up, and there aren't supportive relationships to help us cope. That can make it hard to get through the day, let alone be the best caregivers we can be. The overwhelming burden of toxic stress can affect the health and well-being of adults. It can also affect the development of children in ways that can last a lifetime. Stress that puts us in a constant state of fight or flight can make it feel like we're always on edge, or like it's impossible to calm down. And these feelings can overload our ability to provide the supportive relationships that children need in order to thrive. Think of toxic stress as heavy cargo. Just as a truck can only haul so much weight before it stops moving forward, challenging life circumstances, like losing a job or not having a place to live, can weigh us down. And just as a truck can break down if it carries too much for too long, we too can wear down from being overburdened without the support we need. When toxic stress is related to things we can't control, like poverty, abuse, or racism, it can feel especially heavy to take on. But experiencing toxic stress doesn't have to determine who we are or how we act. And understanding how stress affects us can empower us to make change in our lives. There are things we can do to buffer ourselves and our children against the effects of even the most intense stress. Just as redistributing cargo from an overloaded truck can help it run again, supports and services, things like food pantries, job training programs, or even just talking with someone who cares, can help us focus on caring for ourselves and our children. And just as regular maintenance is required to keep a truck running, reliable access to community services can help us manage the load during challenging times. Reaching out to get support can be difficult, but things that might seem very small, like sitting and breathing deeply, playing I Spy with your child, or even sharing a walk or a snuggle, can make a difference. Over time, these small steps can build our resilience and our children's by strengthening the skills and relationships that help us cope. And our communities can build resilience too by providing services and opportunities that help all families thrive. Supports like these help build a strong foundation for developing brain architecture. So the earlier we can provide them, the better. But the brain is capable of change throughout life, and it's never too late for a tune-up. Coping with and healing from toxic stress takes a lot of effort and support. But we all need the help of others in difficult times. And building resilience and strength in our families and communities is one of the most important investments we can make as a society. In the end, it will help all of us become the parents that we want to be.
That video sits with me a lot, and I think nothing can be said that is truer, that all of those things are important, and I hope that that video hit you in a spot too, that it can feel overwhelming and challenging, and also the importance of reaching out, the importance of connecting with others is so important. And so what do you do when you don't know who to reach out to? If you're concerned and you don't know where to go, or potentially, is this a problem? Is it appropriate? Because, you know, somebody had mentioned earlier in those milestones, including the social emotional, like, how do you know what is typically developing? And behavior is tricky for sure, because there is a level of development and a level of behavior that is developmentally appropriate. They are oftentimes things that are push our buttons, and so it's hard to determine. And so what I have for you here is just a few things to help you and pieces you might not know to reach out to. So virtual office hours is something that we hold in our IECMH program twice a month on Fridays that are available to families. They're provided to support programs that are supporting families as well as early childhood educators, is that's who we typically work with. And it really just is talking through concerns that you might have that you need to speak with someone about, that maybe you need next steps to figure out where do we go from here. And so this is a really great resource, and I will be happy to send it out to you guys afterward, that you get to meet one-on-one with an IECMH consultant across the state, and talk about what your concerns might be. Maybe get some ideas, maybe just get some reassurance and validation that you're on the right track. But this is a wonderful resource that we provide, that I think is accessible to everyone. We talked a little earlier about everything being virtual. This can be phone calls and virtual appointments so that we can connect and you know that you aren't alone. We also offer a newsletter that comes out once a month that really is steeped in child development. It comes up with strategies, and while this is for early childhood educators, it is also really important for families and providers as well. Again, this will be in the link and you'll be able to access it, but it has themes in it. It talks about a variety of different things. You can, in fact, sign up to get on the newsletter so that they'll get sent to you, as well as you can access all the archived as well. I am happy to share the PDF of the handout. Yes, I will send that to them that they can hand it out to you later. And then finally, the resources that I use today. Now, there are so many more available as well, but making sure you're contacting your pediatrician, that is always the first step of where we tell families to go. They can also refer you on to a developmental pediatrician if it's necessary. Early intervention is a great spot to help support that early development and figuring out what the next steps are too. CDC's Act Early, 0 to 3, and the Center for the Developing Child is where I got a good portion of my presentation today. And with that, I realize I am just out of time. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to stay on for a little. Otherwise, I appreciate you all for being here today, and thank you for coming to the presentation.
All right. Thank you so much for that amazing presentation, Lindsay. We really appreciated it. I just wanted to, I put up on the screen some information about our next upcoming webinars. Invitations should be coming out for the March webinar soon. If they haven't gone out already, they might have already gone out. I'm not 100% on that, but April, I don't think we have the specific title yet, but it's going to be on a topic around child abuse and neglect prevention month, because of course that's what April is. So we will have more information on that at our March webinar if it doesn't come out sooner. Again, reminder that you will get a survey following this. We'll send that in an email with the resources that Lindsay is talking about that she's going to give to us. And we will make sure all of you get that. And then if there's any more questions for Lindsay, please go ahead and put those in the chat, or feel free to unmute, and we'll give about another minute or two here, and then we'll close everything out if we don't have questions. Okay, I think we're probably going to go ahead and close out then, because we know you all have busy schedules and busy days, and so does Lindsay. And thank you again, and we hope we will see you guys all next month. Bye.